53 years old, and I've spent the last 22 years making sure that when a hospital's power goes out at 2 in the morning, the ventilators keep running. That's not a metaphor, that's my job. My title is Director of Biomedical Engineering and Facilities Compliance at Meridian Regional Medical Center. I oversee every piece of life-critical equipment in a 400-bed hospital: the infusion pumps, the surgical lasers, the MRI systems, the backup generators. More importantly, I'm the person whose name is on the compliance documentation that keeps us accredited by the Joint Commission and eligible to bill Medicare and Medicaid. Without that accreditation, we don't get paid. Without payment, we close. It's not complicated. I started here when this building still had asbestos in the ceiling tiles. I helped write the original preventive maintenance protocols. I trained the department heads on equipment documentation. I know where every valve, every circuit breaker, every emergency shutoff in this entire building lives. The maintenance staff calls me the building whisperer, which I always thought was a little dramatic, but I understand the sentiment. My wife thinks I care more about this hospital than I care about my own house. She's probably right. Our gutters have been clogged for 2 years. The ventilators in the ICU get serviced every 90 days without fail. I tell you all of this because you need to understand what was at stake before I tell you what happened. About 8 months ago, the hospital's longtime CEO, a man I'd worked alongside for 14 years, someone I genuinely respected, announced his retirement. He'd turned this place from a regional afterthought into one of the top-ranked mid-size hospitals in the state. His departure was handled with a kind of quiet dignity you rarely see anymore. A dinner, a plaque, a firm handshake. 2 weeks later, the board announced his replacement. His daughter-in-law. She had an MBA from a school I'd never heard of and 4 years of experience running operational transformation at a healthcare consulting firm. She was 31 years old. Her name was never announced with any particular fanfare. The press release called her a dynamic visionary with fresh perspective on healthcare delivery. I read it 3 times and still couldn't tell you what she actually planned to do. I found out at the all-staff town hall. She walked in wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She didn't shake hands with anyone on her way to the front. She stood at the podium, smiled at the room the way people smile when they're not actually happy to be there, and said the words that made my stomach drop. I am here to modernize this institution. I've been in healthcare long enough to know that modernize means different things to different people. To the clinical staff, it means better diagnostic tools. To the IT department, it means upgraded infrastructure. To someone who has never actually worked in a hospital before, it apparently means eliminating every process that looks old on paper, regardless of whether it works. She talked for 40 minutes about reducing legacy friction. She talked about digitizing analog workflows. She talked about a new operational philosophy built around what she called radical efficiency. I sat in the back row and kept very still. After the town hall, I caught up with my department's administrative coordinator, a sharp woman who's been here almost as long as I have. She looked at me with an expression I recognized immediately. "You worried?" she asked. "I'm attentive," I said. 3 weeks in, the new CEO requested a meeting with all department directors. She wanted an overview of what she called high-friction legacy systems, her term for anything that required manual documentation, physical sign-off, or processes that predated digital record-keeping. I prepared a 40-page briefing. I explained in detail that many of our legacy processes exist specifically because the Joint Commission requires them, that some of our documentation is on paper because the federal government requires a physical chain of custody, that certain inspection records require wedding signatures because that is what the standard of care demands. She listened politely. Then she asked me to summarize which of these requirements were legally mandatory versus just how we've always done it. I told her they were all legally mandatory. She wrote something down and moved on. I should have pushed harder in that room. I know that now, but I've worked in institutional settings long enough to understand that you pick your battles carefully, and I genuinely believed that once she got her bearings, she would see the reality of how a hospital actually operates. I was wrong. The first thing she changed was the preventive maintenance scheduling system. We'd used the same platform for 11 years. Not flashy, not modern-looking, but deeply integrated with our Joint Commission documentation and our equipment lifecycle tracking. She hired an outside vendor to replace it with something her consulting firm had apparently recommended. The new system looked beautiful. It had dashboards and color-coded alerts and a mobile app. It also had no direct export pathway to Joint Commission documentation formats. I flagged this in writing. I sent emails to her office, to the COO, to the compliance officer. I explained that we had a reaccreditation survey scheduled in 7 months and that we needed our maintenance records in a specific format. I was told that the vendor would handle the integration. The vendor did not handle the integration. For 3 months, I personally maintained a parallel paper system alongside the new digital one, just to make sure we had documentation that would actually pass a survey. My staff worked overtime. I worked overtime. Nobody thanked us for it. Nobody even knew we were doing it. Then came the badge. I need to explain how our compliance access system works, because this part matters. As Director of Biomedical Engineering, I hold what's called Authorized Compliance Representative Credential. It's a Joint Commission designation that says I am the accountable individual for equipment and facilities compliance in this organization. My name, my license number, and my credentials are on file with the Joint Commission directly, not just in our internal records, with them. When a surveyor comes and pulls our accreditation file, my name is what they see as the responsible party. We have a physical ID system for accessing restricted areas, the equipment rooms, the electrical vaults, the server rooms, the backup generator controls. These access credentials are tied to a master compliance registry that syncs with our accreditation documentation. It was a system I helped design 8 years ago, specifically after a Joint Commission surveyor told us our access controls needed to be better integrated with our compliance records. My ID badge was the root credential. Every other access profile in the building derived its authorization from mine. If my credential was active, the system recognized our compliance structure as intact. If it wasn't, well, I was in the middle of a quarterly inspection of the 4th floor surgical suite equipment when my administrative coordinator texted me. 3 words. She's in your office. I finish logging the inspection. I don't interrupt documentation for anything and walk back to my department. The new CEO was standing at my workstation. She had 2 people with her I didn't recognize. HR, I assumed, or operations. They had the look of people who had been told to stand behind someone powerful and not say anything. She turned when I walked in. I wanted to do this in person, she said. That's more respectful. I waited. We're restructuring the facilities and biomedical function, she said. Effective immediately, both departments will report to our new VP of Operations, who comes from a systems background and is better suited to lead the integrated model we're building. I knew what this meant. It didn't mean I was fired. Not yet. It meant I was being laterally demoted. My department would be absorbed. My authority would be stripped. And the person taking over my responsibilities had, based on her phrase, systems background, probably never set foot in a hospital before. I understand, I said. There's also the question of your access credentials, she said. Given the restructuring, we'll need to realign the badge access system under the new reporting structure. She reached into her jacket pocket. She had a small pair of scissors, the kind you use for gift wrapping. We're going to need to deactivate your current badge today. I have your new access card right here. It reflects your revised role and appropriate permissions. She held out her hand. I looked at the scissors. I looked at her. I want to be very clear that I understood in that moment what she did not understand, that my credential was not just a door-opening device, that it was the root node of a compliance authorization tree that touched every accreditation document we had filed with the Joint Commission in the past 6 years. That deactivating it wasn't the same as taking away a key card. I handed her my badge. She cut the lanyard, handed me the new card, and walked out. I stood in my office for about 45 seconds. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney. The new access card she'd given me opened my office, the cafeteria, and the main parking structure. It did not open any clinical area, any equipment room, or any restricted facility. More importantly, when my credential was deactivated in the system and replaced with the new one, the compliance registry flagged an interruption in the authorized compliance representative chain. It's a fail-safe, designed again by me because I'd read enough Joint Commission reports to know that credential discontinuity is something surveyors look for. The flag triggered an automatic notification to Joint Commission's accreditation monitoring system. I know this because I designed the notification parameters. The Joint Commission sent a formal inquiry to the hospital within 72 hours. I know this because my former administrative coordinator, who was not part of the restructuring, texted me a photo of the letter. I was home. My wife had made dinner. I was eating quietly, watching the evening news, trying not to think about 22 years of work being handed to someone with a systems background when my phone rang. It was the hospital's COO. He didn't call me often. When he did, it was never casual. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to be straight with me." "I'm always straight with you," I said. "Is it true that your credential being deactivated flagged us with Joint Commission?" "Yes." Silence. "Is it true that the flag constitutes a formal break in our accreditation compliance chain?" "Technically, yes. It's not an immediate loss of accreditation. It's an inquiry. But if we don't resolve it with documentation showing continuous, qualified oversight, it escalates to a corrective action notice. If we don't respond to that within 30 days, we lose accreditation." "We risk it." "Yes." More silence. "How bad is that?" I had to be careful here because I didn't want to be dramatic, but I also needed him to understand. We bill about $63 million a year in Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements. Joint Commission accreditation is required for that billing. If we lose accreditation, we have a grace period. But if we can't demonstrate compliance, CMS can pull our Medicare certification. Once that happens, the hospital effectively can't operate. Not financially. No. I heard him exhale. "What would it take to fix this?" he asked. "Reinstatement of an authorized compliance representative with continuous credential documentation. That person would need to have an active ACR designation on file with Joint Commission directly. That process takes time, usually 60 to 90 days minimum for a new designee. Unless, I agreed. The next day, I received a call from the hospital's legal counsel, not the in-house attorney, the outside firm they bring in when things are serious. I also received a call from my own attorney, reminding me that I was not obligated to accept any arrangement that didn't address what had happened to my position and my professional standing. I appreciated that reminder. The conversation with legal counsel was polite and carefully worded. They wanted to understand my willingness to engage in a transition support arrangement. I let them talk for about 10 minutes. Then I said, "I'll tell you what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to be reinstated as Director of Biomedical Engineering and Facilities Compliance, in writing with my full reporting structure restored. I want a formal acknowledgement from the board that my demotion was not performance-based. I want my ACR credential reactivated under my original authorization profile, not a new one, the original, so there's no gap in the compliance chain. And I want a written commitment that the parallel paper documentation system my team maintained for the past 3 months, the one that actually kept us survey ready, is formally incorporated into the institutional record." Silence on the line. "Is there anything else?" the attorney asked. "Yes, the VP of Operations who was assigned oversight of my department. I need it documented that she has no authority over compliance-related decisions without my sign-off. Not because I want to make her life difficult, because that's what the regulations actually require. I want to be honest about something. There was a version of this where I let them burn. My own attorney made that case. He said I could walk away, file a wrongful demotion claim, and watch the accreditation situation unfold on its own. He wasn't wrong that I had a case. He wasn't wrong that watching a 31-year-old visionary explain to the Joint Commission why she had scissors in her jacket pocket might have been satisfying. But there are 400 beds in that hospital. There are patients on ventilators tonight. There are nurses on overnight shifts who have nothing to do with any of this. There's a woman in the ICU right now whose family drove 6 hours to be with her and who is counting on every piece of equipment in that building to work correctly. I couldn't walk away from them. I never could. That's the part people don't always understand about this kind of work. It's not just a job. It's a responsibility that doesn't clock out. The board voted on my reinstatement on a Thursday afternoon. I was not in the room. My attorney was. He called me at 4:47 p.m. "Unanimous," he said. I was in the parking lot of a hardware store. I'd been putting off buying new weather stripping for a back door for about 6 months. I sat in the car for a moment. And the other conditions? All of them. In writing. Executed by the board chair and legal counsel. And her? He paused. She tendered her resignation this morning, before the vote. I didn't say anything. Apparently, my attorney said, the board had some additional concerns about her access to restricted server logs during the restructuring process, something about unauthorized review of compliance documentation. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm going to buy weather stripping," I said. "And then I'm going to go home and have dinner with my wife." I was back at my desk the following Monday. My access badge worked. My credential was reactivated. My team, every single one of them had stayed. Nobody had transferred. Nobody had quit. My administrative coordinator had kept a printed copy of every parallel documentation record in a binder she'd stored in her car trunk, just in case, she said. "I owe you," I said. "You trained me," she said. "So technically you owe yourself." That week I submitted our response to the Joint Commission's inquiry, full documentation, continuous credential chain, no gaps. We received confirmation of inquiry closure 11 days later. The reaccreditation survey is in 4 months. We'll be ready. We're always ready. I've thought a lot about what I would say to someone in a similar position, someone who spent decades building something, only to have someone with a good blazer and bad judgment decide it's legacy friction. Someone who's been handed a parking lot badge when they used to hold the keys to everything. Here's what I'd tell them: don't confuse your credential with your value. They took my badge. They couldn't take 22 years of knowing exactly what happens when you don't respect a compliance chain. They couldn't take the relationships I'd built, or the documentation my team had quietly maintained, or the regulatory knowledge that the system itself was built around. The systems you build have memory, even when the people above you don't. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Let the notification fire. Let the inquiry letter arrive. Let the people with the scissors figure out what they actually cut. My wife asked me last night if I was glad I came back. I told her I never really left. I just let the building remind them of that. I've been thinking about this a lot since everything settled. Not the accreditation letter, not the board vote, not even the phone call from my attorney telling me it was unanimous. I keep thinking about the scissors. She had them in her jacket pocket, ready, planned. That detail tells you everything you need to know about how she saw that moment, as a performance. A signal to whoever was watching that the old way was over and she was the one ending it. She didn't understand that a credential isn't theater. It's infrastructure. You can cut the lanyard. You cannot cut 22 years of documented compliance out of a federal registry. That's the thing about expertise built slowly, over decades. It doesn't live in a badge. It lives in the systems you designed, the protocols you wrote, the fail-safes you insisted on even when nobody thanked you for it. When she deactivated my credential, she didn't remove me. She revealed exactly how much the building had been built around me, and she did it to herself with gift-wrapping scissors in front of witnesses. I don't think what happened to her was punishment in any cosmic sense. I think it was just consequence. When you make decisions based on how things look rather than how they work, reality eventually corrects you. It always does. The correction doesn't care about your MBA or your title or whose name is on the CEO door. The Joint Commission letter arrived 72 hours later, exactly as the system was designed to produce it. Nobody sent it. Nobody arranged it. The building just told the truth. What I want people to take from this, if anything, is that integrity is not just a moral quality. It's a structural one. My administrative coordinator kept a backup binder in her car trunk because she'd learned, over years of working alongside me, that documentation matters even when nobody's looking. Especially when nobody's looking. That's not compliance anxiety. That's professional character. You either build that in yourself or you don't. And when the moment comes, and it always comes, the difference is visible. I also think about the patients. There were 400 beds in that hospital. Not one of them had any idea what was happening in the administrative wing. They were just there, trusting that every machine attached to them would keep working. That responsibility never left me, even when my badge didn't open the doors. If anything, it's what made the decision to come back easy. Not the conditions I negotiated, not the board's apology, not the fact that she resigned before the vote. The patience. That's all. You don't abandon a post because someone above you made a bad call. You fix it, and then you make sure it can't happen the same way again. My wife asked me once, years ago, why I cared so much about a job. I told her it wasn't the job. It was the weight of being the person who knows what happens when something fails, and choosing to carry that weight anyway, every single day without being asked. I still feel that weight. I always will. And I've made my peace with the fact that most people will never see it, never thank you for it, and occasionally try to cut it off your lanyard with scissors from a gift wrap drawer. The building remembers. That's enough.